Hey guys, tonight we drift into the candlelit halls of the medieval world, a place where the idea of beauty was not just something you admired in passing, but something you were expected to chase, often at great cost. You're standing in front of a polished metal mirror, the kind that warps your face slightly, and what you see staring back isn't good enough. The nobles of the court have set a standard you must live up to. Skin so pale it looks like you've never seen the sun, cheeks drained of life itself, a ghostly mask that whispers wealth and purity. And here's the reality check. Unless you've got a stash of dangerous cosmetics and a will to survive lid poisoning, you probably won't make it out looking the part. So before we go any further, if this quiet space makes you feel even a little less alone, you can like the video and subscribe, but only if it feels right to your heart. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Are you lying awake in a quiet room at 2 a.m., or maybe starting your day in a rainy city, eyes still heavy? Drop your time and place in the comments. Let's remind each other we're not alone out here. Now dim the lights, let your shoulders relax, and let's begin tonight's slow, strange journey, together, here on Timeless Sleep. You stand in the middle of a medieval apothecary, jars stacked high on wooden shelves, each filled with powders, pastes, and mysterious tinctures. The air smells faintly of vinegar and herbs, but behind the pleasant surface lurks something far more sinister. The quest for pale skin drives women, and even some men, to smear lead-based powders across their cheeks and foreheads. The moment it touches the skin, you'd feel a tightening sensation, like chalk drying on wet paint. It whitens you instantly, but at a cost: sores, rashes, and eventually poisoned blood. Imagine being praised at court for looking like a porcelain doll, while your insides quietly corrode. Paleness was everything. To be tanned meant you were a field worker, someone toiling under the hot sun. To be pale meant leisure, privilege, and a life cushioned away from hard labor. The lighter your skin, the stronger the illusion that you floated above the struggles of common folk. So you coat layer upon layer of this lethal dust until your face loses all natural tone. You aren't yourself anymore. You're a symbol, a walking canvas of wealth. One mainstream fact here. In Elizabethan England, which lingered on the tail end of the medieval era, Venetian ceruse became infamous. This cosmetic was essentially white lead, mixed with vinegar. The lead caused slow poisoning, while the vinegar only deepened the damage by making skin raw and more absorbent. Women kept applying it, even as their skin cracked and scars grew worse, covering blemishes with more of the very substance causing them. The irony is bitter, like licking copper coins. And yet, the obsession with pale skin wasn't limited to just powders. You'd also find recipes suggesting raw egg whites, applied across the face to stiffen and give a temporary glow. The effect was like wearing a natural mask, glossy, tight, fragile. One wrong laugh and the egg film would flake away. Others suggested washing in donkey's milk, which was believed to soften and whiten the complexion. Cleopatra supposedly bathed in milk centuries earlier, so naturally, medieval elites copied the idea, because if it worked for a queen, it must work for you too. But let's circle back to lead, because the stuff didn't stop at powders. Lip stains and rouges often contained mercury, another delightful poison, giving you the illusion of vitality at the expense of your nervous system. Imagine hands trembling during embroidery, and everyone around assuming you're swooning from romance, when in reality your body is collapsing from beauty products. A quirky little tidbit slips in here. Crocodile dung, yes, actual crocodile dung, was sometimes used in concoctions as a supposed skin treatment. The logic was mystical. Exotic ingredients from faraway lands were believed to hold magical beauty secrets. If it was rare and disgusting, surely it must be powerful, right? Picture yourself dabbing a little reptile excrement under your eyes before a feast, hoping it makes you radiant. That's not a glowing review, that's just glowing in the dark with bacteria. Back in the great halls of castles, you see nobles floating in with powdered faces that shimmer under torchlight. Their skin looks ghostly, smooth, almost unreal. You might think they look ethereal, but if you stepped closer, you'd smell the harsh tang of vinegar and catch the faint chalky dust falling from their cheeks. When they smiled, if they smiled, you'd see lips painted with cochineal dyes or crushed flowers, faint cracks of red bleeding into white powder like brushstrokes on plaster. You can't escape the sun forever though. Farmers worked outside daily, their browned skin signaling poverty. To cover any trace of sun darkening, women wore heavy veils outdoors. Wealth wasn't just about looking pale in the moment. It was about ensuring no one could ever mistake you for someone who worked in the fields. You walk through a bustling market, and the difference between a merchant's wife and a noblewoman is written all over their faces, not in smiles but in shades of skin. Imagine the daily routine. You wake up in a drafty chamber, the morning light just barely seeping through shutters. A maid brings in a bowl of water, maybe with herbs steeped in it if you're lucky. You wash your face, not to cleanse but to prepare the canvas. Then comes the ceruse powder, brushed on carefully, sometimes mixed with a bit of honey to help it stick. You sit still as layers are applied, each one stealing a little more of your natural colour, until your cheeks are blank, like freshly scraped parchment. Over this, perhaps a hint of rouge is added, because entirely ghostly was just as bad as being ruddy. Balance mattered. As you move through the day, the powder cracks and smudges. You reapply. If someone kisses your hand, they leave with a dusting of lead. If you sweat, streaks form. If you cry, though crying in public would be quite unseemly, the tears carve rivers down your cheeks. Looking beautiful was constant maintenance, a battlefield of touch-ups and careful posture. Now, step into the evening feast. The hall is dim, torches flickering, shadows stretching long. Music plays, lutes, harps, and the soft hum of voices. You look around at the powdered faces, each reflecting the light like pale moons. Some nobles are already showing the damage. Scars hidden under thick coats, cheeks that look oddly swollen. But no one dares speak of it. To be pale is to be admired. To not conform is to be dismissed. The brutal part isn't just the poison, though. It's the mindset. You're trapped by expectation. If you walk into court with even a hint of natural flush, someone whispers that you must be of lower class. Beauty and status are welded together, so tightly that risking your health seems a small price. The cruelty is subtle, a prison painted in white powder. Every now and then, you hear of someone who takes it too far, skin eaten away, cheeks collapsing into hollows. Whispers spread, she was too vain, she was punished for excess. But privately everyone knows it could happen to them too. They still reach for the jar each morning. One can almost picture the discarded mirrors in noble estates, tiny polished discs of silver so warped they distort your reflection. Maybe that's a blessing. If the mirror showed your true, scarred face, you might scream. Better to see the illusion, pale, flawless, and deadly. You sit back now, imagining the silence after a feast, when candles burn low and nobles retreat to chambers. You think of the powder still clinging to their cheeks as they sleep, pressed into pillows, seeping into pores. The ritual will begin again at dawn. And here's the wry little joke for you. At least sunscreen nowadays doesn't involve crocodile dung. You put on SPF 50 and walk into the sun without worrying your grandchildren will inherit your poisoned blood. Progress tastes like coconut-scented lotion, not vinegar and chalk. The obsession with pale skin lingered for centuries, a shadow stretching far beyond the medieval period. Even in portraits of Elizabeth I painted long after the medieval era, you can still see the ghostly mask of ceruse, as though she were half alive, half statue. What began as a medieval status marker hardened into cultural memory, echoing into every powder compact and skin-lightening cream across history. And so you wander back from that world, your face tingling as though dusted in powder, your mind carrying the heavy truth. Beauty here is not soft or kind. It is demanding, ruthless, and often fatal. You wonder if tomorrow, in the flicker of dawn, you dare to reach again for the jar of white poison, knowing that to refuse is to stand apart, and to comply is to slowly fade away. You sit before a dimly lit mirror again, but this time, you notice something odd about the faces around you. Look closely at the women of the court, those draped in velvet gowns, their necklines heavy with pearls, their foreheads stretched high, unnaturally wide, like blank canvases waiting for a painter's hand. The brows you expect to see, those defining arches of expression, are gone. The hairline, too, has crept backward, as if someone dragged it toward the crown of the skull. And yes, they did it deliberately. Beauty demanded a grand forehead, smooth and bare, a field of pale skin that was thought to signal wisdom, nobility, and refinement. The bigger your forehead, the loftier your reputation. To achieve this, women plucked and shaved. Picture yourself hunched by a window in the weak morning light, a small knife or pair of tweezers in hand. One by one, hairs are pulled until your brow feels raw, peppered with little stings. A maid might help, but many women did it themselves, a private ritual of pain. Some even rubbed walnut oil into the area to discourage regrowth, because nothing was more humiliating than rebellious strands sneaking back to ruin the ideal smoothness. You can't hide from the cruelty of it. The more you pull, the more your face feels exposed. The expression becomes strange. Without eyebrows, surprise looks eerie, anger looks blank. It's like wearing a permanent mask, and yet this emptiness was praised. Poets admired clear brows and shining foreheads. Chroniclers described queens and noble women as bright of countenance, though what they really meant was hairless and pale. One mainstream fact for you: Marguerite of Provence, the queen consort of Louis IX of France in the 13th century, was praised in court records for her smooth and lofty brow, described almost as though her forehead was a halo. Chroniclers wrote these descriptions with awe, turning what was essentially plucking into a symbol of divine beauty. And now, a quirky tidbit. Some women took to applying ointments made from pigeon droppings to the plucked area, believing it would bleach the skin even lighter and prevent hair growth. Imagine the double indignity: the sting of plucking followed by smearing bird waste on your face, all to maintain a forehead wide enough to write a short poem on. If you were a commoner, you might laugh at the absurdity, but nobles couldn't afford to ignore it. The forehead was real estate in the theatre of status. A high, bare brow made your face look elongated, giving you a lofty, almost celestial aura. This wasn't just cosmetic, it was symbolic. To medieval thinkers, a large forehead implied a larger brain, or at least more space for thoughts. The joke, of course, is that people were scraping off their brows to look intelligent, while doing something that made them look permanently startled. Picture yourself walking into a feast. Candles flicker, shadows play across tapestries, and rows of bare foreheads glisten like polished ivory. Men glance admiringly, whispering about a lady's noble brow, while behind the scenes, maids are cleaning up tufts of plucked hair, tiny sacrifices littering the rushes on the floor, and you, sitting there, can feel the cool draft on your newly exposed skin, wondering how long it will take before the stubble grows back to shame you. The practice didn't stop at eyebrows and hairlines. Some women plucked their eyelashes too. Can you imagine? A single lash snagged out, your eyes watering, lids swelling, and yet they endured it. The result was wide, unframed eyes that looked larger, more vulnerable, more doll-like. Combined with the blank forehead, the overall effect was alien, almost uncanny. But in a world where beauty was measured by distance from the natural, the more you transformed, the more refined you appear. There's also a kind of dark humor to it. Imagine sneezing in the middle of a feast, your bare eyes watering furiously, no lashes to protect them, and your companions rushing to offer embroidered handkerchiefs, not out of sympathy, but because watery eyes might smear your expensive lead powder. One sneeze could ruin hours of painful preparation. It wasn't just women either. Some men, especially at court, experimented with the look, though it never became as widespread. The forehead was a canvas for female status, just as armor and beards were canvases for male power. Still, whispers floated through courts of men dabbing ointments to thin their brows, desperate to soften their features and appear more refined. Now imagine the practical consequences. You're traveling on horseback, the wind sharp and cold, the sun glaring. Without eyebrows, sweat has a free pass. Salt stings your eyes until you can barely see. Without lashes, dust irritates and scratches. Beauty has literally stripped away your natural defenses. And yet, when you return to the castle and step into the hall, the whispers aren't about your discomfort, but about how noble your brow looks. The suffering vanishes under the praise. Here's where we tie it back to the brutality of medieval beauty standards. None of this had shortcuts. Today, you'd use a razor in seconds, or even laser treatments. Back then, every single hair was pulled or scraped by hand. You'd sit in silence, jaw clenched, tears welling in your eyes, while someone carefully worked row by row. The ritual was half pain, half prayer, a daily reminder that your body belonged to an ideal greater than yourself. And then comes the unsettling thought. Did women actually like it, or did they simply endure it? You can imagine quiet moments. Women gathered in private chambers, complaining in whispers about the agony, but never daring to abandon it. A lady who refused might be laughed at as rustic or unkempt, so they laughed about it together, joked about their bald brows, but still submitted to the tweezers, because social survival depended on it. The high forehead craze was not limited to France or England. Across Europe, similar practices appeared. Italian frescoes from the 14th century show women with smooth, towering foreheads, their hair pulled tightly back under jeweled nets. Spanish chronicles praise the open brow as a sign of virtue. Beauty was not just fashion. It was a language spoken across kingdoms, with the plucked brow as its punctuation mark. Now, slip into a smaller, quieter scene. You're alone in your chamber at night, a small rushlight flickering. You lean toward a polished piece of bronze, examining your reflection. The redness around your brows hasn't faded yet. Your skin itches. You rub at it absent-mindedly, wincing. Somewhere in the distance, a lute plays a lullaby. You wonder if the troubadour would sing differently if he saw you now, half bald, your eyes watery. But tomorrow, in the bright light of court, no one will see the struggle, only the result. And here comes the gentle joke of the night. Think of modern eyebrow trends. In the 1990s, people plucked them razor thin. Today, it's thick, bushy brows brushed upward, like caterpillars on parade. Beauty is fickle. One day you're scraping them off, the next you're tattooing them back on. If a medieval lady could peek at today's world, she might laugh herself to tears, or perhaps faint at the sight of Cara Delevingne's brows dominating the fashion scene. But back in the medieval hall, no one's laughing. The high forehead is the crown of beauty. Your face, altered and exposed, becomes a mirror of nobility's ideals, and every tug of a hair is a reminder that in this world, beauty isn't something you're born with. It's something you painfully carve into yourself, strand by strand, until your reflection matches the impossible dream. You wake up to the scent of herbs simmering in a clay pot, and today's task is not plucking or powders, but tending to the crown of your head. In the medieval world, nothing said youth, purity and desirability quite like golden hair, and if you didn't happen to be born with it, you had to manufacture it. Blonde locks were celebrated as almost otherworldly, symbols of saints, angels and heroines in romances. If you flip open an illuminated manuscript or gaze up at stained glass, notice how many holy figures are given halos of pale yellow hair. So of course every woman of status wanted to copy the divine look, even if it meant risking their health and dignity in strange ways. Blonding methods were brutal. To start, saffron was a favorite, a spice so costly it could bankrupt you if used in large amounts. Women would soak their hair in mixtures steeped with saffron threads, hoping the golden pigment would cling. It worked. Sometimes, though, only temporarily. Imagine walking around reeking faintly of soup, while pretending it's a perfume. Then there was the vinegar and horse urine rinse. Yes, really. The acidity was thought to strip the hair of darker pigments, leaving it lighter. You sit in the courtyard under the glaring sun, your maid carefully pouring a jug of this pungent mixture through your lock. The smell alone makes you gag, but you endure because beauty requires sacrifice. And afterwards the sunlight is crucial. You sit for hours, hair spread like a halo, baking in the sun until it crisps slightly. The end result, if you're lucky, a streaky yellow hue that screams wealth, because only someone with status has the time to lounge all afternoon while stewing in vinegar and urine. One mainstream fact: in Venice during the late medieval and Renaissance periods, women sat in specially designed bleaching hats, wide-brimmed straw contraptions with holes at the top to pull strands of hair through. They'd sit on balconies or rooftops, hair threaded upward, faces shaded, while their tresses baked in concoctions of alum, saffron, and lye. This practice was so iconic it birthed entire treatises on beauty care, a kind of medieval Pinterest board for going blonde. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some recipes for blonding suggested mixing ashes of burnt leeks or even powdered pigeon bones into the rinse. Yes, Someone thought grinding up a bird skeleton and scrubbing it into your scalp might give you that golden glow. At this point, you start to wonder if medieval beauty was just a long series of dares gone wrong. The obsession with blonde hair wasn't just about looks, it carried symbolism. A woman with golden locks was thought to embody innocence and desirability, a walking contradiction of purity and temptation. Troubadour songs praise fair-haired maidens as radiant and angelic, yet also as dangerously alluring. Picture yourself walking through a great hall, with hair shining pale under torchlight, every gaze following, every whisper marking you as both saintly and seductive. You're not just a woman, you're an archetype. For brunettes and redheads, the pressure was immense. You'd risk ruining your natural hair texture just to chase a fleeting yellow tint. Some unlucky women ended up with brittle, scorched hair that snapped off in clumps. Imagine stepping into court with patches missing, desperately pinning veils to cover bald spots, while behind you, people snicker about vanity gone wrong. Meanwhile, if you were naturally blonde, you had to work to keep it that way. Dirt and soot darkened hair easily in smoky castles, so constant rinsing was expected. Washing wasn't done with gentle shampoos, but with harsh mixtures. Soapwort boiled in lye, rosemary water, or even fermented barley. The scalp burned, the hair dried out, but at least you avoided being mistaken for a peasant. It's worth remembering that peasants never bothered with such rituals. Their hair was what it was: brown, black, red, tangled, sun-bleached from labour in the fields. But among nobles, blondness became so desirable it was practically currency. A golden braid might catch a prince's attention more quickly than wit or wealth. Picture the scene of a summer festival. Ladies sit in a row on a balcony, their heads tilted back, hats shading their faces while strands of hair poke through little slits to catch the sun. They look serene, angelic even, but the smell drifts down to the crowd below. Vinegar and urine carried on the breeze. The peasants laugh quietly, knowing the noble ideal is a stinking charade. Yet up above, the women feel proud, because tomorrow their locks will shimmer under candlelight, and the laughter of peasants matters far less than the admiration of lords. Now imagine the maintenance. A banquet is coming, and your golden tint has begun to fade. You call in a servant to prepare the rinse again. She lugs in a bucket, steam rising, the sour smell filling your chamber. You steel yourself as she pours it, cold and sharp, through your hair. Every drop is a reminder that beauty here is both labor and punishment. And here comes the small joke for you. Today, someone goes to the salon, pays a fortune for highlights, sits sipping coffee under a dryer, and complains about the smell of ammonia. Medieval women would have laughed or gagged and said, "Try horse urine instead." Different century, same desperation for blonde perfection. The symbolism of hair ran deep. In medieval literature, villains often had dark hair. The brooding, shadowy types contrasted with the luminous heroine. To align yourself with light, you had to bleach yourself into it. Hair wasn't just decoration, it was narrative. The wrong shade told the wrong story, and stories defined reputation as much as lineage or wealth. It's not surprising then that hair was often guarded jealously. Locks were gifted as tokens of love, woven into charms, or pressed into books. Imagine clipping a shining strand, tying it with silk, and giving it to a knight before battle. A literal piece of your beauty carried as protection. The more golden the lock, the more potent the symbolism. Of course, men weren't immune either. Knights with lighter hair were often celebrated in chronicles, their flaxen heads shining under helmets. Did some of them secretly rinse with saffron too? It's hard to say, but vanity, like gossip, had a way of crossing gender lines. The dark side of all this is obvious. Not everyone could achieve the golden look, and those who failed were left feeling lesser. You picture a noble woman with stubbornly dark hair, streaked and brittle from endless attempts. She avoids mirrors, veils her head, and smiles stiffly when others boast about their shimmering locks. Beauty is exclusion as much as inclusion, a club with painful dues. By night, the rituals left lingering marks. Hair smelling of vinegar, scalp itching from lye, hands stained yellow from saffron. Yet in portraits, only the result mattered. Golden strands curling softly, frozen forever in paint. The suffering vanished beneath layers of pigment, just as it vanished in memory. And here you are, imagining yourself on that balcony, hat shading your face, hair spread like straw, sun pressing heat into every strand. Hours pass. Servants bring water, but you don't move, because stillness means perfection. Eventually your head throbs, your scalp burns, but when you rise, your hair shimmers faintly. Not enough, never enough, but enough to be noticed. And that notice is everything. Tomorrow the cycle begins again. Rinses, powders, sunlight, prayers. You'll keep bleaching until your hair resembles a halo, or until it falls out entirely, leaving you covering your head with veils and claiming humility. Either way, the standard is brutal, the cost immense, and yet you do it again, because in this world, beauty isn't simply vanity, it's survival. You stand in your chamber, a servant tightening the strings of your bodice until you can hardly breathe. The air already feels thin, and she hasn't even pulled the final knot. This is the world of early corsetry, though not yet the Victorian cages of whalebone and steel. The medieval ancestors were cruel in their own way. To shape the body into a fashionable form was to declare discipline, wealth and submission to beauty's will. Straight backs, cinched waists, and flattened busts. These were the ideals sculpted by linen, wool and stiffened fabric that pressed against skin until bones ached. Imagine yourself stepping into a kirtle, the fitted underdress worn by noble women. The lacing runs up the front or side, and the servant pulls, pull after pull, as though stringing a bow. The garment molds your torso, compressing your chest, forcing your shoulders back. Your breathing becomes shallow, but you smile, because the silhouette matters. Wide hips, narrow waist, smooth bust line. This is the architecture of status. The shape you present to the world declares that you are not a labourer, you are a lady of leisure, dressed not for work but for spectacle. A mainstream fact here, while corsets as we picture them are often linked with the 16th century onward, medieval women already wore tightly fitted garments known as cotehardis, and later gowns stiffened with whalebone or reeds. These early bodices weren't yet the steel trap cages of later centuries, but they created similar effects, compressing the torso and forcing posture. Chroniclers often praised queens for their slender waists and straight carriage, compliments born out of restrictive clothing. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some garments used paste-stiffened linen, literally soaked in glue-like mixtures and dried until rigid. Wearing one was like strapping cardboard to your chest. Sweat softened it, meaning you'd sag by day's end, a drooping sculpture that had to be restarched. Imagine your servant dabbing at you with a paste-soaked cloth in the morning, turning your undergarments into wearable papier-mâché. The brutality of these early corsets wasn't always visible. You might not see broken ribs or fainting spells as in later centuries, but the slow toll was there. Backs ached from unnatural posture. Breathing shallowly left you lightheaded. Eating a full meal became impossible. You nibbled delicately, because too much food pressed cruelly against compressed organs. Even laughter was risky. Your ribs protested every chuckle. Picture the banquet hall. Long tables stretched beneath painted ceilings, candles flickering, the scent of roasted meat filling the air. Servants bring platters heaped with venison, pies stuffed with spices, loaves of fresh bread. You lift a morsel to your lips, chew and swallow carefully, because your bodice allows little room for indulgence. Across the hall, another lady shifts uncomfortably, her stays digging into her ribs as she tries to sip wine. She smiles politely, but her hand presses against her side, and you know the pain she hides. Beauty is discipline, and discipline means silence. Now, step outside, where common women walk with freedom of movement. Their tunics loose, their steps unencumbered, their waists are not pinched, their breaths not shallow. They bend, carry baskets, nurse children, and laugh loudly, without restraint. You envy them for a heartbeat, but then you remember. Freedom of the body is read as poverty. The loose dress marks them as workers. To be noble is to trade comfort for control. The shaping of the body was not only for women. Men too wore fitted doublets, their torsos padded or laced to exaggerate broad shoulders and narrow waists. Masculinity was sculpted through fabric, just as femininity was compressed. A knight might remove his armor only to lace himself into another kind of cage, ensuring his silhouette looked sharp at court. The battlefield had one armor, The banquet hall demanded another. But back to your own experience. Imagine rising in the morning, bones stiff from yesterday's wear. The servant unlaces you, and the relief is almost painful, like taking off too tight shoes, only for your entire torso. Red marks stripe your skin, angry indentations from the pressure points. You rub at them, sighing, before preparing to do it all again. This cycle becomes daily rhythm: compress, endure, release, repeat. A strange detail emerges in the records. Some women inserted rolls of fabric or even small wooden rods into bodices to maintain rigidity. These acted like primitive stays, digging into flesh if you slouched. The garment itself punished bad posture. The silent tutor pressing you upright to walk gracefully wasn't natural. It was enforced by clothing that jabbed you the moment you faltered. Now, consider dancing. The lute strikes up. Couples pair off and you join in. Your steps light across the rush-covered floor, but each spin, each bow is a test. You move carefully, afraid the laces might snap or that your shallow breaths will leave you faint. Perhaps you do stumble, catching yourself against your partner's arm. He chuckles softly, not unkindly, but you blush. To falter in dance is to betray the strain beneath your smile. And then comes the quieter, more intimate side. In private chambers, women sometimes loosened their laces slightly, letting out a breath they'd been holding all day. The relief was immense, but it couldn't last. If another noble woman saw you unkempt, rumors might spread that you were careless, that your figure sagged, that you disrespected fashion itself. The prison wasn't just fabric, it was the gaze of society watching always, waiting for weakness. Here's the gentle joke for you tonight. Imagine explaining waist trainers to a medieval lady. She'd nod sagely, then point to her own stiffened gown and say, so you've learnt nothing in 800 years. Some things, it seems, never change. The cruelty of early corsetry was its invisibility. Unlike lead poisoning or plucked brows, the damage was quiet: shallow breaths, aching spines, suppressed appetites. It didn't kill quickly, but it reshaped how women lived every moment of their day. Sitting, walking, even laughing became performances, rehearsed and restrained. The body was no longer your own, it was a sculpture built for others' eyes. Imagine now the contrast. You loosen your laces at midnight, exhaling fully for the first time all day. Your chest rises and falls with delicious freedom, lungs expanding, ribs stretching. For a fleeting moment, you are yourself again. Not a silhouette, but dawn will come, and with it, the strings and knots that bind you back into shape. Beauty does not forgive, and it certainly does not forget. You sit at a banquet table in the dim glow of tallow candles, platters of roasted meats and sugared fruits gleaming before you. The hall hums with laughter and music, but your attention keeps drifting to the smiles of those around you. They're not the gleaming, pearly grins you might expect. In fact, some look alarmingly black, others pocked and rotten. And here's the strange twist. Those ruined teeth aren't a shameful secret. They're a badge of wealth. The more sugar you could afford, the more decay you carried, and that rot itself became its own perverse kind of beauty. Imagine taking a bite of candied almonds, the sugar crunching between your teeth. The flavor is heavenly, rare, exotic. Sugar in medieval Europe wasn't a kitchen staple, it was imported luxury, arriving from distant lands at enormous cost. To sweeten your wine or glaze your meat was to shout, without words, that you had money to burn. Each grain was worth more than its weight in common salt. Here's the mainstream fact. By the late medieval period, sugar was so costly in England and France that it was often locked away in special chests, dispensed in small amounts by stewards who treated it like gold dust. It wasn't until the 15th century that the wealthy began indulging enough to cause widespread tooth decay. Queen Elizabeth I herself, though she lived later than the high medieval era, was infamous for her blackened teeth, the result of a sweet tooth made possible by her royal treasury. But let's roll back to the earlier centuries. Picture yourself as a wealthy noble at a feast. The platters arrive not just with savory meats, but with dazzling sugar sculptures. Subtleties, they were called. Imagine entire castles built of spun sugar, knights carved from marzipan, swans molded from crystalline candy. You lean forward, marveling at their artistry, before breaking off a piece and popping it into your mouth. It crunches, melts, sticks to your teeth, sweetness floods your tongue, but behind it lurks danger, cavities, infections, throbbing pain in the jaw. Yet you eat anyway, because to refuse is to appear less refined, less fashionable. The poor rarely touched sugar. Their sweetness came from honey, if they were lucky, or dried fruits. So when they smiled, their teeth were often plain but intact. Ironically, the peasants kept stronger teeth simply because they couldn't afford the rot of the rich. You sit in a market square, watching a farmer's wife laugh, her teeth sturdy if stained, and you realize she has what nobles cannot: a mouth that doesn't ache every time she bites bread. Now, here's a quirky tidbit. Some nobles, keen to flaunt the fashion of sugar teeth, would even blacken their teeth artificially, using soot or herbs to mimic decay if they didn't yet have it naturally. Think about that for a moment. Deliberately painting your teeth to look diseased, because rottenness meant wealth. If that isn't beauty turned upside down, nothing is. The suffering behind the smiles was immense. Imagine lying awake at night in a cold chamber, jaw pounding from an abscess. There are no dentists, no antibiotics. At best, a barber surgeon might yank the offending tooth with iron pincers. No numbing, no relief beyond strong wine. You scream, blood runs, and the whole festers anyway. Infection creeps deeper, sometimes fatal, yet still the pursuit of sugar goes on. Better to risk death than be left out of the sweet parade of status. At feasts, sugar appeared in nearly everything. Syrups drizzled over fish, candied rose petals sprinkled into stews, preserved fruits glistening like jewels. Guests dipped fingers into bowls of crystallized ginger, sucking sweetness from their fingertips. Children of nobles, too, were fed sugar early, their milk teeth already eroding before adulthood. The cycle began young: sweetness, decay, pain, and pride. Imagine now the grotesque intimacy of a courtship. A young lord leans close to a lady, his breath warm with spiced wine, his smile revealing blackened stumps. She blushes, not from disgust but from admiration. He can afford sugar, therefore he can afford her. Beauty here is not about symmetry or cleanliness, but about displaying consumption, even when it poisons the body. And here's your light joke for the section. Next time you complain about a dentist's bill, remember that medieval people would have traded half their estate just for a toothbrush. At least when your dentist lectures you, they don't arrive with iron tongs and a tankard of ale for anesthesia. The rituals to combat decay were desperate and often bizarre. Some rinsed their mouths with vinegar and wine, thinking it would cleanse away rot. Others chewed on mint or parsley to mask the smell of infection, though it did nothing for the pain. A few even rubbed crushed pearls or coral on their gums, believing the powders could restore whiteness. Instead, they only scratched enamel further, speeding the ruin. And yet, portraits still captured smiles. Painters softened the damage, of course. No one wanted to immortalize the Queen's toothless grin in oil, but the reality lurked behind the canvas. Nobles spoke with lisping voices, chewed carefully, covered their mouths with embroidered kerchiefs. Beauty and wealth demanded a price, and the mouth became a battlefield of indulgence versus endurance. Now picture a grand wedding. The bride, pale-faced and high-foreheaded, walks in with her veil trailing, golden hair glinting under the torchlight. When she smiles, her teeth are dark, but the crowd sighs with admiration. She is rich, they whisper. She is beautiful. No one mentions the agony she will feel that night, when the sweetness wears off and the ache sets in. Beauty isn't about comfort here. It's about proving you can afford the torment. Step into the kitchen after the feast, where servants scrub pans encrusted with sugar syrup. They lick the spoons, sneaking scraps, marveling at the flavor they rarely taste. They'll never have sugar teeth, never be mistaken for nobility. Their mouths remain plain, but healthier. It's a cruel irony. The poor live longer in this one regard, even as nobles waste away under the burden of their riches. Imagine, too, the vanity of powders. By the late Middle Ages, tooth powders made from burnt rosemary, sage, or even crushed brick were applied with cloth. You rub them on your aching teeth, praying they'll whiten, but often they just scratch enamel further, deepening the damage. The powders sting, your gums bleed, and you spit red into the basin. Still, you smile at court, because the performance must go on. By candlelight, you try to sleep, jaw clenched against throbbing pain. Somewhere in the castle, laughter drifts from another chamber, followed by a cry, perhaps another noble having a tooth yanked. You turn over, burying your face in the pillow. Tomorrow, more sugar will be served, and you will eat again, because to refuse would invite whispers of poverty. The brutality of this beauty standard wasn't only physical, it was psychological. You were trapped in a cycle where wealth demanded visible decay. The more your teeth blackened, the more your status gleamed. To have a healthy smile was almost shameful, a mark of the working class. Imagine the dissonance, craving beauty, yet forced to embrace ruin. And so, the hall becomes a place where smiles are both proud and pained, every laugh carrying an echo of suffering. You see nobles grin through rot, lifting goblets in toast, their eyes glittering even as their teeth crumble. The feast ends, but the ache endures. Beauty, in this world, gnaws at you from the inside out. The air in the hall grows heavy as the feast stretches into the late hours. Torches sputter and smoke, filling the rafters with a haze that seeps into every fold of clothing and every strand of hair. You inhale, and what you smell isn't the clean soap and shampoo freshness we expect today. No, the scent of medieval beauty is something far stranger, something that would probably send you scrambling for fresh air. In a world where bathing was rare, often even considered dangerous, fragrance itself became a tool of survival and of status. You rise in the morning to a basin of lukewarm water. That's the extent of your wash. Hands, face, maybe feet if the season is warm. Full body bathing? Risky. Doctors warned that hot baths opened the pores, letting disease seep in. Some even claimed it weakened the body, draining strength. The church frowned on excessive bathing too, linking nakedness with sin. So the noble response was simple: don't scrub away filth, smother it under layers of perfume. Imagine a lady's chamber lined with small glass vials, imported from Venice or Damascus. Inside, precious oils steeped with roses, violets, and lavender glimmer in the candlelight. She dabs a drop onto her wrists, another behind the ears, then brushes scented powder into her hair. The fragrance drifts as she walks, a floral veil covering the sourness beneath. To your nose, it's a cocktail of blossoms and sweat, intoxicating at first, but cloying the longer you sit near it. Here's the mainstream fact. Medieval Europe imported perfumes and oils from the Islamic world, particularly from places like Al-Andalus and the Middle East, where distillation techniques had been perfected. Rosewater, musk and ambergris became coveted luxuries among nobles. Their expense made them perfect markers of wealth. If you smelled of roses, it meant you could afford to drown yourself in them instead of water. And now for the quirky tidbit. One recipe for a medieval deodorant included powdered orris root mixed with crushed pigeon droppings, rubbed under the arms to mask body odor. Yes, once again, pigeon contributions make an appearance in the beauty world, proving that medieval innovation often smelled worse than the problem it tried to fix. The stench of status wasn't only floral. Musk, derived from the glands of deer, was thick and animalic, the kind of smell that clung stubbornly to fabric. Ambergris, a waxy substance vomited up by sperm whales and left to float at sea, was treasured as a fixative for perfumes. Imagine holding a lump of hardened whale vomit, worth more than gold, and knowing that dabbing it on your gown would keep the rose and violet scents lingering for days. It sounds absurd, but nobles craved it. To them, the strange origins only made the fragrance more powerful, more exotic. Step into a crowded church on Sunday morning. The air is thick with incense, frankincense and myrrh mingling with the perfumes dabbed on every noble neck. The poor smell of sweat and hay, their simple wool tunics carrying the scent of labour. But the nobles radiate gardens and spice markets. The irony, of course, is that beneath those layers, their bodies reek of the same human odour. Beauty here is a game of camouflage. Daily life without regular bathing meant constant improvisation. Clothes weren't laundered often either. Heavy gowns were brushed and aired, but the inner linings absorbed sweat day after day, so nobles carried pomanders, little metal balls filled with herbs and resins, worn on chains or belts. You picture yourself walking through a bustling hall, a pomander swaying at your hip, releasing bursts of cinnamon, clove, and rosemary with every step. It's your personal shield against both the stench of others and your own. Perfume wasn't just about hiding odor, though. It became a language of seduction. A lady brushing lavender water into her hair was signaling refinement and allure. A knight anointing his cloak with musk projected virility. In romances, lovers often recognized one another by scent before sight. The smell of roses drifting through a corridor could set hearts racing, hinting at a hidden tryst. Imagine leaning close in whispered conversation, the mingled aromas of violet and sweat forming a strange, intimate perfume all its own. But there was brutality in this beauty ritual too. Some perfumes burned the skin. Oils too strong caused rashes, while powders clogged pores without bathing to rinse them away. The build-up festered. A lady who smelled of roses might have red, raw patches beneath her gown, yet still she dabbed more, because the fragrance wasn't about comfort, it was about reputation. The paradox was sharp. Water was feared, but perfume was adored. You see nobles sitting in gardens, inhaling the scent of flowers, then going home to smear those same blossoms onto their skin, convinced it kept them clean. Doctors even prescribed perfumes as health remedies, believing sweet smells warded off plague and miasma. A sachet of herbs tucked into your bodice wasn't just fashion, it was survival. Now imagine a feast again. The hall grows hot, the press of bodies overwhelming, sweat soaks through linen shifts, odors rising thick as steam, but above it all, perfume dominates. Musk, ambergris, rosewater. It's dizzying, like walking through a greenhouse that hasn't been aired in months. You sip your spiced wine, smile politely, and breathe shallowly, because fainting from the perfume cloud would be the most embarrassing fate of all. Here's the light joke for you. Today we complain when someone in the office wears too much cologne. In medieval times, everyone wore too much cologne, because not wearing it meant you were the one stinking up the court. Subtlety wasn't the goal. Survival was. The servants, of course, smelled different. Their labor made daily washing unavoidable. They'd splash with cold water at rivers or wells. Their scents were plain: earth, smoke, animals, but nobles judged them for it. Perfume wasn't about hygiene. It was about class. To smell natural was to smell poor. To smell of roses and whale vomit was to smell rich. Picture yourself at night, finally free of the public eye. You unlace your bodice, peel away layers, stiff with powder and sweat. The perfume still clings, stubborn as ever. You rub at your skin, trying to breathe past the heavy sweetness. The chamber pot nearby reeks. The rushes on the floor carry the musk of yesterday's feast. But you close your eyes and remind yourself, smell like this is to live above the common. And so the brutal truth emerges. Beauty in the medieval world wasn't clean, wasn't fresh, wasn't even real. It was a performance of scent, layered over filth, an illusion painted in flowers and oils. Beneath the fragrance, bodies itched, sores festered, clothes soured. But no one dared admit it. Better to drown in perfume than be seen as ordinary. The hall is bright with torchlight, faces glowing pale beneath layers of powder, hair gleaming from saffron rinses. Yet something feels uncanny as you look around. Where are the eyebrows? The noble women sitting at long trestle tables seem to share a strange uniformity. Smooth foreheads that stretch into bare planes, eyes wide and oddly vulnerable. The brows that would have given them expression are missing, stripped away by fashion. For centuries, the arch of a brow had framed the human face. But in the medieval court, those arches were erased and painted back on like fragile afterthoughts. You rise from your seat and follow one lady into her chamber as she prepares for the evening. The maid holds up a small bronze mirror, warped but serviceable, while the lady leans close. Her brow is bold, plucked smooth down to the skin. With careful strokes, she takes a charcoal stick and begins to draw thin, curved lines where her brows once grew. A little rouge mixed with ash gives them color. In the flicker of candlelight, the drawn brows catch the eye, faint yet deliberate. Expression becomes a painted illusion, controlled entirely by hand. Mainstream fact: in the late Middle Ages, especially in parts of Italy and France, the complete removal of natural brows became fashionable. Chronicles and portraits from the 14th century show women with high, domed foreheads and penciled-on brows, sometimes arched dramatically, sometimes nearly invisible. It was praised as a mark of refinement, a deliberate distancing from the wild or animal look of natural hair. Now for the quirky tidbit. One recipe for brow paint recommended a mixture of soot and bat's blood, believed to give a rich, glossy black that stayed longer on the skin. Imagine leaning close to the glass, carefully dipping your brush, and knowing you were smearing bat blood above your eyes, just to appear beautiful. If that doesn't sound like dedication or desperation, nothing does. The effect of the missing brows was eerie. Without them, expressions became harder to read. Surprise, anger, joy, all blurred into the same wide-eyed mask. This wasn't accidental. Nobles preferred faces that appeared serene and controlled. Natural emotion was for peasants, whose brows furrowed under sun and labor. For the elite, beauty meant blankness. The less your face revealed, the more noble you seemed. Imagine the daily routine of maintaining this look. Each morning, after plucking stray hairs with sharp tweezers or scraping with a knife, you rub ointments to soothe the redness, sometimes goose fat, sometimes herbal balms. Then comes the paint, carefully drawn with a brush thin as a reed. One slip of the hand and your brows are crooked, forcing you to wipe and begin again. The patience required was immense, but patience itself was part of noble beauty. To spend hours before a mirror was proof you had no other labor to perform. At feasts, you glance across the hall and see dozens of painted brows, some arching high like crescents, others faint as whispers. Together they create a dreamlike scene, a gathering of faces half human, half mask. Candlelight glints off powdered cheeks, painted brows shimmer faintly in black or brown, and for a moment you wonder if you've wandered into a masquerade without masks. The consequences of plucking were painful. Infection was common. Tiny wounds on the brow became entry points for dirt, leading to swelling and sores. Yet even as pus gathered or scabs formed, the brows were redrawn on top. Beauty demanded continuity. No blemish could excuse breaking fashion. You picture yourself dabbing charcoal onto tender, inflamed skin, eyes watering as the powder stings, but smiling anyway as the maid declares your brows perfectly arched. And here comes the modern joke. In the 1990s, people plucked their brows into thin lines, only to regret it decades later when bushy brows came back into style. A medieval lady might scoff, at least ours grew back, though in truth, years of plucking often led to permanent thinning, a curse they likely didn't anticipate. The obsession with painted brows wasn't limited to women. Some men, particularly in courts of fashion-conscious Italy, also shaped their brows or rubbed them lighter to appear more delicate. Masculinity itself bent under the weight of beauty standards. Though discreetly, a knight might suck at the practice in public, yet whisper to his servant to bring a pumice stone to soften his brow hairs. The pressure to conform was universal, even if the rituals differed. Now imagine walking in the street. Common women pass, their brows full and untamed, furrowed against the sun. To the noble eye, this looks crude, animal-like, but to you, there's something comforting in their natural expressions. The honesty of a laugh that wrinkles the forehead and darkens the brows. Compared to the blank faces of court, the peasant's brow feels alive. But you know better than to envy it. Natural brows mark you as poor. Smooth, painted brows make you noble, no matter how much they strip away your humanity. In literature, poets praised women with arched brows like drawn bows, and eyes framed in soft lines. The imagery reveals the fantasy at work. The brow wasn't just hair, it was an artistic stroke, a crafted shape meant to enhance the eye like a frame around a jewel. To be beautiful was to be a work of art, a painting that breathed, but every painting cracks. At the end of the night, after the feast and dancing, you return to your chamber and wipe away the painted lines. Your face looks strange without them, unfinished. You reach instinctively to redraw, even in private, because bare brows remind you of your own sacrifice. The hair's gone, the skin sore. You turn away from the mirror, extinguish the candle, and sleep in the comfort of darkness where no one sees. Perfume may mask odor, powder may hide scars, but the missing brow cannot be concealed. It is the most visible declaration of your submission to beauty's brutality. Tomorrow, you'll sit again before the mirror, pluck again, paint again, until your face once more becomes the mask the world demands. You lean forward over a polished copper basin, a maid hovering at your side, her hands steady as she mixes a paste of chalk-white powder with sharp-smelling vinegar. The concoction fizzes faintly, releasing an acrid scent that makes your eyes sting. But this is the ritual. Another morning of painting radiance onto your skin. Medieval beauty demanded not only pale faces, but glowing ones. And that glow often came at a cost so steep it carved scars beneath the very powders that promised perfection. The mixture goes on cold wet at first, then dries to a mask that tightens across your cheeks like plaster on a wall. You sit still, feeling it crackle as it hardens, each tiny fissure tugging your skin. The maid waits for it to settle before dusting more powder over the top, hiding every freckle, every blemish. The effect is startling. Your face gleams in the candlelight, ghostly pale, smooth as ivory. From across the hall, people will see nothing of the rashes, scars or sores beneath. Mainstream fact: Venetian ceruse, a blend of lead carbonate and vinegar, was one of the most infamous cosmetics from the late medieval into the Renaissance era. Its promise was alluring, an immediate whitening and smoothing of the skin, but it was corrosive. Lead seeped into the bloodstream, causing trembling hands, hair loss, even death. Women knew the risks, yet they continued to use it, because the appearance it gave was too valuable to abandon. And the quirky tidbit for tonight: some beauty manuals recommended rubbing roasted snail slime across the face before applying powders, claiming it would smooth the flesh and keep it fresh. Imagine smearing snail ooze over your cheeks as a primer, then layering lead on top, the kind of skincare routine that makes you grateful for modern moisturizers. The brutality of these cosmetics wasn't hidden. You've heard whispers of women whose skin grew grey and pitted from years of use, whose cheeks developed ulcers that refused to heal. Yet instead of stopping, they doubled the layers, painting thicker masks to conceal the damage. Beauty became a cycle of destruction and disguise, each application hiding wounds caused by the last. Picture a banquet evening. Torches flare against gilded walls, the air heavy with spice and song. Across the room, a noblewoman turns her head, her powdered skin glowing pale and luminous. From afar she looks divine, but up close the cracks show, tiny flakes of powder drifting down her neckline, faint lines etched where the paste dried too harshly. She smiles carefully, lips painted red with cochineal dye, and you wonder how much of her radiance is beauty and how much is suffering masked beneath chalk. The vinegar in the mixture wasn't only cosmetic. Physicians claimed vinegar opened the pores and purified the skin, but in truth, it made skin raw, more vulnerable to the poison of lead. You feel the sting as it dries, a dull burn that never fully fades. By the end of the evening, your cheeks ache, the skin beneath inflamed. When you finally wash it away, with wine perhaps or rose water, the rawness glares back at you in the mirror, but tomorrow you will paint it on again. To modern eyes, the cruelty seems unimaginable, but for the medieval lady, the stakes were high. A pockmark from smallpox, a scar from childhood, these blemishes could be social death. Nobility was a theatre of appearances, and the audience expected flawless masks. The powders were not vanity alone, they were armor against judgment. Now imagine the daily labor of this ritual. Each morning, the paste must be mixed fresh. Lead powder doesn't store well once combined with vinegar. Servants grind the minerals, their hands chalky, their lungs full of dust that shortens their lives without anyone noticing. They prepare the concoction in wooden bowls, then bring it to you, their mistress, as though they're offering medicine. You sit still while they brush it on, eyes half closed, surrendering your body to the process. The irony deepens when you consider who did not use it. Common women working in fields or markets had no need for lead masks. Their beauty was weather-worn, tanned by sun, marked by laughter lines, and sweat. To nobles, that natural face was considered coarse, unfashionable, but beneath the masks, the nobles were the ones rotting from within. The painted glow was also theatrical. In candlelight, lead powders reflected brilliantly, making faces appear luminous. Imagine a dance hall filled with pale ovals bobbing in the darkness, each one gleaming like a ghost. But as the night wore on and sweat broke through, streaks ran down cheeks, Powder caked at the edges of noses. The illusion cracked under heat, yet everyone pretended not to see. And here's your gentle joke. Imagine trying to hug someone at court. You'd leave not only a smudge of powder on their shoulder, but possibly a rash on your own. Affection was hazardous. Intimacy meant sharing toxins. At least today, a hug might smudge your foundation, not poison your bloodstream. Some women experimented with safer alternatives. Flour dusted lightly on the cheeks, rice powder where available, but these didn't last as long or shine as brightly, and in a world where being noticed mattered, most chose poison over safety. If your rival at court gleamed more brightly than you, it was a loss not just of beauty but of influence. Now consider the secrecy around these practices. Recipes circulated in whispers, written in small books of secrets kept locked in chests. A lady might share her formula with a trusted friend, but rarely with outsiders. Beauty knowledge was power, guarded as fiercely as jewels. If someone asked why your skin glowed so perfectly, you might smile and say, "God has blessed me," while privately grinding more lead into your mortar. Nighttime was cruelest. After hours under powder, your skin throbbed. You wiped away layers with cloth soaked in wine or vinegar, the sting sharp enough to bring tears. Beneath, the raw patches glared, red, angry, sometimes even bleeding. You dabbed goose fat or honey to soothe them, knowing it wouldn't heal before morning. Then you lay in bed, face pressed into a linen pillow already stiff with powder stains, and prayed tomorrow's mask would hide the damage. The brutality of this standard wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. To appear without powder, to show your true skin, was to risk humiliation. Imagine walking into court, barefaced, scars visible, cheeks flushed naturally, whispers would follow. She has grown careless, she has lost her beauty. In truth, you were healthier than those glowing masks. But health didn't matter. Appearance did, and so the glow of lead and vinegar became a cage. It chained women to their mirrors, to their powders, to rituals that ate away at their very flesh. Each compliment, "Your skin is radiant," was both victory and condemnation, because it meant you'd succeeded at destroying yourself gracefully. The hall quiets now, the feast ending, candles guttering low. You picture the nobles returning to their chambers, wiping powder from aching faces, only to prepare for the cycle again. The glow of radiance lingers in memory, not in reality. And you know, in this world, beauty is never soft. It is sharp, corrosive, and always, always brutal. The hall is alive with music and chatter, yet your eyes drop downward, catching sight of something odd beneath the sweeping gowns and brocade tunics. The shoes, long, narrow, tapering into absurd points that stretch out like daggers, some curving slightly upward at the tips. These are the infamous polanes, shoes so exaggerated in length that walking gracefully became a test of balance, and comfort was a forgotten dream. Fashion in the medieval world didn't stop at the face or the torso. It reached all the way to your toes, demanding sacrifice in every step. You picture yourself sliding your feet into a pair. The leather feels stiff, narrow, pressing against the sides of your toes. The pointed front extends far beyond the actual foot, sometimes a foot or more in length for nobles. To keep them from dragging in the muck, the ends are stuffed with moss or wool. You stand, wobbling slightly, the points poking outward like lances. Try to take a step, and your gait shortens, each stride awkward and careful. These shoes are less for walking, more for display, a declaration that you don't labor, you don't run, you don't bend in the fields. Mainstream fact: polanes became especially popular in the 14th and 15th centuries, spreading across Europe from Poland, hence their name. Their length varied by status. Common folk wore shorter points, while the nobility flaunted absurdly long ones. In some places, the tips reached 20 inches, so long they had to be tied with chains to the leg to prevent tripping. Kings and councils even issued laws regulating shoe length according to rank, making your footwear a literal measure of your place in society. And now, a quirky tidbit. Some chroniclers claim that the most flamboyant nobles stuffed the tips of their polanes, not just with moss, but with aromatic herbs, rosemary, thyme, lavender, so their shoes released pleasant scents as they walked. Imagine your every step puffing little clouds of herbal fragrance, a medieval air freshener strapped to your toes. But the reality beneath the glamour was painful. The narrow shape crushed toes together, rubbing skin raw, causing blisters, bunions, and infections. Walking any distance meant limping by the end, your posture warped as your body compensated, hips and back straining to balance against the absurd length. Doctors of the time warned of lameness of the body from tight shoes, though few listened. After all, what mattered more, comfort or courtly admiration? Picture a noble banquet. Men lounge at the high table, their poulain extending like weapons beneath the cloth, points curling upward like beaks. Women in long gowns lift their skirts slightly as they walk, revealing slender, absurd shoes that look more suited for a puppet stage than a muddy street. Servants trip over them, laughter ripples through the hall, but still they're admired. The longer the shoe, the greater the wealth, because only someone who never laboured could afford to hobble themselves daily for fashion's sake. Step outside into the street. The cobbles are slick with mud, refuse and worse. Your poulains sink into the muck, the pointed ends bending awkwardly. You try to avoid puddles, but the length makes quick steps impossible. Children laugh as they watch you mince along, clutching your gown, but inside you feel pride, because each awkward step proves your status. If peasants mock you, it's only because they can't afford such glorious discomfort. Walking wasn't the only challenge. Try mounting a horse with points a foot long, or dancing at a feast without stepping on your partner's toes. Knights complained that poulain interfered with movement in battle, the points tangling in stirrups or catching on armor straps. Chroniclers mockingly described soldiers forced to cut off their shoe tips before combat, a humiliating sacrifice of style for survival. Imagine pausing before battle, sword in hand, only to snip your fashionable shoes because you couldn't swing them properly. And here comes your gentle joke. Imagine today's red carpet celebrities tottering in high heels, so impractical they need assistance to help them walk. Pahalins were the medieval version of stilettos. Ridiculous, painful, and yet irresistible to anyone, desperate to flaunt their place in the social hierarchy. The regulations around them reveal just how disruptive they became. In England, King Edward IV decreed that no one under the rank of lord could wear points longer than 2 inches. The church railed against them too, condemning poulains as symbols of vanity and sin. Priests thundered from pulpits that pointed shoes mocked God's creation, reshaping the human foot into something unnatural. Yet sermons rarely stopped fashion. The longer the priests raged, the longer the shoes seemed to grow. Behind closed doors, the suffering was real. You imagine peeling off your poulains at night, toes red and swollen, blisters raw. The relief is exquisite, like removing shackles. But the damage lingers. Crooked toes, aching arches, back stiff from poor posture. In some cases, bones deformed permanently. Yet come morning, you force your feet back into the leather prisons, because beauty is not about ease, it is about endurance. The symbolism of poulains stretched beyond fashion. They became markers of arrogance, symbols of indulgence and excess. Peasants muttered that nobles wasted leather while they went barefoot. Satirical poems mocked men who tripped over their own points, comparing them to devils with cloven hooves. In art, demons were sometimes drawn wearing exaggerated poulains, a subtle dig at human vanity, yet even ridicule couldn't kill the trend. To wear them was to declare yourself untouchable, above mockery, above practicality. Now imagine the court dance. Music swells, couples glide across the rush-covered floor. You take careful steps, toes pointing like spears, movements restricted by your shoes. The dance becomes less about grace and more about balance. You smile through the strain, aware that every glance measures not your rhythm, but the length of your points. The shoes speak louder than your steps. Servants saw the absurdity daily. They patched torn tips, stuffed them anew with moss, polished the leather until it gleamed. Some probably laughed behind closed doors, mimicking their master's awkward gait, feet tripping on exaggerated points, but they also knew better than to mock openly, because shoes this costly were symbols of power. A servant might secretly envy even the pain of poulains, since it marked a life beyond labour. The brutality of this beauty standard was subtle but constant. Every moment of the day, your body reminded you of the choice you'd made: aching feet, strained back, humiliation if you stumbled. And yet, the reward was social survival. To walk barefoot, or even in simple rounded shoes, marked you as poor, invisible. To suffer in pollaines was to be seen. At the end of the night, you picture yourself sitting at the edge of your bed, tugging the narrow shoes from your swollen feet. The skin is rubbed raw, the nails bruised. You massage your toes, sighing, before slipping beneath the covers. Sleep is brief and restless. Dawn will come, and with it, another day of strapping your body into discomfort from head to toe. Brows plucked, skin powdered, torso laced, and feet trapped in points. Each piece of beauty adds its own weight, its own ache. Yet together they create the noble mask you must wear to survive. Morning light spills through the shutters, catching dust motes in the air. You step into the courtyard and immediately shield your face from the sun. That warm glow we crave today was considered a curse in the medieval world. To be kissed by sunlight was to be marked as labouring, coarse and common. Tanned skin belonged to the peasantry. To those who bent in fields from dawn to dusk, pale skin. By contrast, whispered of silk-lined chambers, of lives sheltered from toil, beauty was measured by absence, the absence of sun, of marks, of any hint that you touched the earth. Imagine walking among farmers in a village. Their arms are browned and rough, their faces lined by years of weather. They laugh easily, their teeth strong, their bodies sturdy. Then picture yourself returning to the castle hall, surrounded by nobles whose cheeks gleam ghostly white beneath powders, who hold parasols on warm days to keep the sun from touching them. The contrast is stark. One group wears the sun as an honest badge, the other hides from it like a plague. Mainstream fact: medieval literature often equated pale skin with virtue and nobility. Courtly poets praised ladies for their milk-white or ivory complexions. Meanwhile, darker skin was sometimes disparaged as a sign of low birth or foreignness. Medical theory reinforced this, claiming that pale skin indicated cool and balanced humours, while tanned or ruddy complexions suggested excess heat or coarseness. The tan taboo wasn't just fashion, it was tangled with medicine, class and morality. Now for the quirky tidbit, one 14th century beauty tip suggested using bread soaked in wine and left overnight on the skin to draw out the heat of the sun. Imagine lying in bed with slices of soggy bread plastered to your face, praying you'll wake up pale as snow. The smell of stale wine and crumbs in your hair is the opposite of glamorous, but desperation made it worth the attempt. Avoiding the sun demanded elaborate strategies. Women veiled themselves heavily outdoors, layering translucent fabrics over their faces and necks. Wide-brimmed hats and hoods shadowed their cheeks. Even gloves were worn, not for warmth but to preserve the whiteness of hands. Imagine a noble woman travelling through the streets, her entire body swaddled in fabric. Despite the summer heat, sweat prickling beneath layers, but comfort sacrificed for the promise of paleness. Sun exposure was not just feared, it was punished socially. A lady returning from a journey with even the faintest flush risked whispers at court. She looks rustic, people might say. She must have spent too much time outdoors. The flush of vitality that we associate with health was, in their eyes, a blemish. So powders were applied thickly to cover tans, vinegar rinses rubbed into cheeks to bleach them pale again. The pursuit of whiteness was relentless. Picture a midsummer feast. Outside, peasants celebrate with dancing in fields, their skin bronzed, their laughter loud. Inside the castle, nobles gather in shaded halls, shutters drawn to block the sun. Candles are lit though daylight blazes beyond. You sit among them, powder ghosting your cheeks, while beyond the walls the world is alive with sun. The separation isn't just physical, it's symbolic. The pale belong indoors, apart, protected from the life-giving star above. The irony is brutal. Those who fled the sun often grew weak from lack of vitamin D, their bones brittle, their bodies frail. Meanwhile, the peasants, mocked for their tans, grew strong on bread, onions, and sunlight. Beauty demanded fragility, health was sacrificed for aesthetics. You can almost hear a physician advising a pale noble to stay indoors, avoiding warmth, while the same physician marvels at the sturdiness of sun-darkened labourers. Another layer of cruelty was racial. Medieval Europeans often linked dark skin with foreignness. using complexion to reinforce ideas of otherness. To be pale wasn't just noble, it was European, Christian, pure. This made the beauty standard not only brutal for health but also exclusionary, weaving prejudice directly into fashion. Imagine how devastating for those born naturally darker, trapped in a system that prized a shade they could never achieve. Think of the rituals to reverse tanning. Some women rubbed lemon juice or vinegar on their skin, hoping the acidity would bleach away color. Others tried egg whites as masks, their skin tightening beneath the film. Some even experimented with mercury-based ointments, which corroded flesh while promising paleness. You sit there, your cheeks burning from the sting, eyes watering, but you endure because every sting is a step away from shame. And here's your modern joke. Today, people pay fortunes for tanning beds, bronzing lotions, and beach holidays. Medieval nobles would faint at the thought of intentionally darkening their skin. Imagine bringing a sunbed into a 14th century castle. The queen would probably have it burned as witchcraft. Beauty's pendulum swings wildly, never pausing long enough for anyone to rest. But even then, the pendulum shifted occasionally. In some regions, a faint flush was briefly fashionable, a sign of liveliness. Rouge was painted onto powdered cheeks to mimic the glow of health, but only under strict control. Natural tans were shunned. Artificial color, carefully placed, was celebrated. It was a bizarre double standard. Sunlight's touch was vulgar, but painted imitation was elegant. Now, imagine walking along a garden path. The sun glimmers through leaves, tempting you with warmth. You long to lift your veil, to feel the light on your face, to laugh freely as peasants do, but you keep it down, your steps measured, because tomorrow your reflection in the bronze mirror will betray you if you yield. The garden smells of roses, but beneath your veil, the air is stifling, humid with your own breath. The price of paleness is suffocation. The cruelty of this standard extends to memory itself. Paintings and manuscripts immortalized pale faces, erasing tans as though they never existed. Even if a noble woman had once been sunburned, her portrait showed her skin milk white. History itself conspired to uphold the illusion, hiding reality beneath layers of pigment, just as the women had hidden it beneath powders. At night, you lie in your chamber, veils discarded, skin red from the vinegar rub. You touch your cheek and feel the rawness, the sting of chemicals and cloth. The moonlight washes pale through the shutters, and you take comfort in it, pretending its silver glow will bless your skin with the whiteness the sun threatened to steal. Tomorrow, the cycle will continue. Avoidance, concealment, endless striving for a purity as fragile as it is painful. In this world, beauty is never natural. It is built on denial, denial of sunlight, denial of health, denial of comfort. Each pale face at court is a triumph over the body's instincts, a victory of culture over nature, but the victory is hollow, because beneath the powder, the body pays its silent toll. You wake in the dim chill of morning, and before you rise fully from bed, the ritual begins. A maid approaches, holding a bundle of stiffened cloth and peculiar lengths of bone. It isn't armor, though it might as well be, but the hidden undergarments that shape your body before a single gown is laid across your shoulders. Beauty in the medieval world did not stop at skin or face. It extended beneath clothing, a silent prison of animal guts, wooden rods, and even whale bones that pressed you into the desired silhouette. You step into the linen shift first, the soft underlayer that at least gives comfort against the harsher fabrics. Then comes the shaping garment. It wraps tightly around your waist and hips, stiffened with reeds or strips of whalebone. Your servant laces it, tugging hard, each pull tightening your breath. You lift your arms as instructed, posture forced straight. By the time the final knot is tied, your torso feels bound, your ribs pressed inward, your belly flattened. You are no longer simply yourself. You are sculpture, mainstream fact, whalebone, or baleen. The flexible keratin from the mouths of whales was highly prized for its strength and bend. By the late medieval period, it was used not only in undergarments but also in fans, boxes, and even armor reinforcement. Its use in clothing predates the rigid Victorian corset, appearing in stays and bodices that controlled the female figure centuries earlier. Reeds, horn, and even wood were also used for stiffening, depending on wealth and availability. And now the quirky tidbit. Some undergarments were made using dried animal intestines stretched and sewn into strips, a material both surprisingly durable and disturbingly squeaky when bent. Imagine walking through a great hall, each step accompanied by faint creaks from the pig gut frame beneath your gown, a grotesque symphony no one dares mention aloud. The purpose of these hidden structures was not merely vanity, they projected status. To have a narrow waist, flared hips and a smooth bust line signaled that you were free from labour, shaped by leisure rather than by work. Clothes fell differently on such bodies, gowns draped elegantly, brocades gleamed without wrinkles, and the body beneath became a living mannequin for fabric. The undergarments ensured that even the plainest woman looked noble, so long as she endured the constraint. Imagine the discomfort of a summer's day. Heat builds beneath layers of wool and velvet, sweat soaking the shift beneath. The whalebone stays rub against damp skin, leaving raw patches. You try to sit gracefully, but the rods dig into your sides, reminding you of their presence. At feasts you eat carefully, nibbling on morsels, because too much food presses painfully against compressed flesh. Gluttony is impossible. Your body itself enforces moderation. But the system is cruelly clever. Your restrained figure becomes an advertisement for wealth and virtue. Men praise your posture, your slender grace, never acknowledging that it is achieved through rods and straps cutting into skin. Women envy your shape, then go home to bind themselves the same way, passing the cycle from chamber to chamber, generation to generation. Picture yourself in a tailor's shop. The artisan measures your body not as it naturally is, but as it appears bound. The gown is cut to fit the silhouette created by the stays, not the living flesh. Over time, your body adjusts, shoulders pulled back, spine arched unnaturally, hips forced outward. Even when the garment is removed, you stand differently, trained by bone and cloth. It is as though beauty has rewritten your posture permanently. The burden falls on men too, though differently. Doublets were sometimes stiffened with padding or rods to exaggerate broad shoulders and flat stomachs. A knight might remove his armor only to don another kind of cage, his body shaped to match ideals of strength. Masculine beauty was sculpted as deliberately as feminine, though the suffering was more discreet. Now imagine the intimacy of removing these garments at night. The laces loosen, the pressure eases, and you inhale deeply for the first time all day. Red lines stripe your skin, ridges where whalebone pressed. You rub ointment onto sore spots, sighing with relief. For a brief moment, you feel free, unshaped, simply human, yet you know that tomorrow the binding will return. Beauty allows only fleeting reprieve. Here's the wry joke for you. Imagine explaining Spanx or shapewear to a medieval lady. She would laugh, then lift her skirts to reveal the whalebone digging into her ribs, saying, "Ah, so you still torture yourselves, only with softer tools." Across centuries, the same desire to sculpt the body persists, just with different instruments of suffering. The brutality of these garments wasn't limited to physical pain. They demanded dependence. A woman rarely dressed herself fully. She needed servants to lace her stays, to tighten knots beyond her reach. To be beautiful was to be bound, and to be bound was to be reliant on other. Autonomy was stripped away with each pull of the cord. Even funerary practices reflected the obsession. Some noble corpses were dressed in stiffened garments before burial, their bodies posed in perfect silhouette for eternity. Death offered no escape from beauty's demand. Even in the grave, posture mattered. Now picture a feast where all the noble women sit in rows, backs perfectly straight, waists narrow beneath embroidered gowns. They appear serene, statuesque, yet beneath the fabric, their bodies ache. A sudden laugh causes one lady to wince, her stays digging sharply. Another shifts on her bench, the rods creaking faintly. No one speaks of it. To acknowledge the pain is to break the illusion. Outside, peasants laugh freely, their tunics loose, their bodies moving as they please. They carry loads, bend at the waist, eat heartily. Their silhouettes are unshaped, their posture natural. Nobles mock them as coarse, but secretly, perhaps, envy their freedom. For peasants, beauty isn't sculpted. It simply exists in strength and survival. In portraits and manuscripts, the hidden structures vanish. Artists paint gowns flowing smoothly, bodies slim and poised. The rods, bones and guts beneath are erased, just as the discomfort is ignored. History remembers the illusion, not the suffering. Only whispers in tailors' records and servants' complaints hint at the truth. At night, you drift to sleep sore but resigned. Tomorrow will bring the same ritual, binding, lacing, reshaping. The animal bones, the reeds, the stiffened cloth will enfold you once more, turning you into the figure demanded by society. And though you ache, you know you'll endure, because here, beauty is not freedom, it is a cage, and to live within it is the only way to belong. You sit before a mirror, candlelight flickering across your pale, powdered skin. The feast is tomorrow, and your own hair, thin, dark, and stubborn, will never do. Nobility demands not only golden or pale locks, but abundance. Hair was a crown long before actual crowns rested on brows, and in the medieval world, the thicker, longer, and glossier it appeared, the higher your beauty seemed to rise. The problem, of course, was that real hair rarely matched ideals. Enter the strange, secret world of false hair, wigs, extensions, and even horsehair pieces stitched and woven to transform ordinary heads into halos of splendor. A maid approaches with a bundle wrapped in linen. She unfolds it to reveal hair pieces, coils of human hair cut from the heads of peasants, glossy strands bought from merchants, even ropes woven from horsehair bleached pale to mimic nobility's favorite shades. You lean forward as she begins to braid them into your own hair, sewing with thin ribbons, weaving until your head grows heavy. By the end you feel taller, grander, and yes, stiffer. The transformation is both enchanting and suffocating. Mainstream fact: medieval wigs and hairpieces were widely used, especially in courts of France and Italy. Documents show noble women purchasing human hair from poorer women, often at markets where peasants sold locks for coin. These were then dyed, styled, and worn as additions to enhance volume. Hairpieces weren't only for women. Men too, particularly older nobles, wore wigs or padded caps with sewn-on locks to mask baldness. Now for the quirky tidbit. Some recipes suggested soaking horsehair in lye and urine to lighten it before weaving it into extensions. The result was coarse, itchy, and smelly, but from a distance it shimmered like the blonde locks praised in poetry. Imagine wearing a halo of horsehair on your head, the smell faint but persistent, and smiling serenely while courtiers whisper about your angelic tresses. The weight of these false additions was immense. Imagine carrying several pounds of hair woven tightly onto your scalp. The skin pulls, your head throbs. By evening, your neck aches from the strain, but you endure, because the effect is dazzling. At a glance, your hair cascades down your back in waves no mortal genes could produce. Nobles murmur, envious, asking who your dyer is, never suspecting the truth, that half your glory belonged to another woman or another species. Picture the elaborate hairstyles that resulted: coils looped high on either side of the head, braids pinned across the crown, veils draped delicately over mounds of hair. False locks gave the volume needed for such constructions. Without them, hair would sag or collapse. With them, your silhouette became a sculpture, as carefully crafted as the architecture of the hall itself. But with glory came peril. Hairpieces harbored lice easily, crawling from borrowed hair into your own scalp. Imagine the itching at midnight, scratching furiously, while your maid combs through strands with a fine-toothed bone comb, squashing insects by candlelight. Still, you wear the pieces again tomorrow because beauty demands it. Better to itch and endure than appear bare and plain. The symbolism of false hair was powerful. Long hair symbolized virtue, fertility, and youth, but paradoxically, too much display of natural hair was considered indecent. So women veiled their tresses, but beneath the veils they added volume with extensions. The message was subtle. Hidden abundance hinted at hidden power. A lady's hair might never be fully seen, but whispers about its length and thickness added to her allure. Men, too, used hairpieces, though more discreetly. Baldness was mocked, equated with weakness or sin. A lord losing his hair might sew a padded coif with strands attached, slipping it beneath his hat. To reveal the truth was shameful. Better to sweat beneath false locks than admit to age. Even kings weren't spared. Chronicles hint that some monarchs wore wigs long before they became fashionable in later centuries. Now imagine a bustling market. A peasant woman sits on a stool, while a barber snips her hair, gathering the locks into a bundle. She accepts a few coins, enough to buy bread, then walks away shorn. Later her hair appears at court, gleaming on the head of a duchess who will never know its origins. Beauty here is built not only on sacrifice but on exploitation. The bodies of the poor literally woven into the heads of the rich. Here's the wry joke of the night. Today people buy extensions made of 100% real human hair, advertised proudly. Medieval nobles would laugh at the honesty. They preferred not to mention where theirs came from. Out of sight, out of mind. As long as the banquet hall glowed with golden braids. Maintenance was endless. Wigs had to be cleaned, often with vinegar or herbs, though clean was relative. Damp wigs, mildewed, horsehair pieces, stiffened and tangled. Servants spent hours brushing, oiling and braiding their fingers. For noble women the process was tedious, but also symbolic. The more hours your appearance required, the greater your status. And there were risks beyond lice. A wig too close to a torch could ignite. Flames racing through dried hair faster than cloth. Chronicles tell of ladies catching veils or hairpieces alight, their beauty literally burning before horrified eyes. Imagine the terror of feeling heat at your scalp, the smell of singed hair, while others scramble to smother the flames. Beauty could kill swiftly as well as slowly. Yet the allure of hair never waned. Poets praised golden braids, artists painted halos of curls, lovers begged for locks as tokens. A knight might tie a false strand to his arm before battle, believing it carried luck, never knowing the hair didn't belong to his lady at all. Beauty was illusion, but illusion held real power. Now picture yourself at the feast. Your hair towers high, braids looped and pinned with jeweled clips, veils cascading like waterfalls. The weight makes your head tilt slightly, neck straining. But when you step into the hall, gasps ripple. You are radiant, untouchable, your hair a crown more valuable than gold. Pain fades under praise, and for a few hours you believe the illusion yourself. But later, in your chamber, the maid unpins the strands, loosening braids, unraveling horsehair. Your head feels light, scalp sore where hair's pulled. The false locks lie in a heap, lifeless without you. Touch your own thin hair and feel the sting of inadequacy, the shame of knowing tomorrow you must bind yourself to the illusion again. The brutality of false hair was not only in the weight, the lice, the fire risk, it was in the way it reshaped identity. Your beauty was never fully yours. It was borrowed, stitched together from pieces of others. You walked through court as a patchwork creation, admired not for yourself, but for the illusion perched above your brow. The feast begins with trumpets, and as you walk into the great hall, all eyes rise not just to your gown or your painted face, but to the weight on your head. Crowns, circlets, jeweled headdresses, symbols of wealth and status that glittered in candlelight, but carried with them the hidden cruelty of weight, strain, and even poison. Medieval beauty was not only about powders, plucked brows, or gilded hair. It was about carrying your worth literally on your skull, even if it left bruises, headaches, and aching necks in its wake. Your lady's maid had spent hours securing the piece this morning. It is not a full crown. You are not royalty, but a jeweled circlet of gilt bronze, inset with glass beads made to look like rubies. The band presses just above your ears, heavy enough to dig into the skin. She cushioned it with linen strips, but still the pressure throbs. Add to that the pins holding your veils and hairpieces in place, and your scalp feels like a battlefield of metal and bone. Mainstream fact: crowns, coronets, and richly jeweled headgear were essential markers of medieval status. Gold and precious stones weren't just adornments, they signaled divine favor and earthly power. Monarchs and nobles wore them at feasts, weddings, and ceremonies. Even when real gems were scarce, glass imitations were set into bronze to mimic wealth. The sheer weight of these objects could be extreme. Some surviving medieval crowns weigh several kilograms, more than enough to strain the neck if worn for hours. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some recipes for cosmetic jewelry. Polishes included powdered pearls mixed with vinegar, which created an iridescent paste to smear over stones to enhance their shine before an event. Imagine coating your sapphires in sour-smelling goo just to make them sparkle brighter for one evening. Beauty was as much about trickery as truth. Now picture the great hall tonight. Nobles sit at the long tables, and everywhere you look, foreheads gleam beneath crowns, circlets or elaborate hennins, those towering cone-shaped hats with veils spilling down like banners. The hennin alone is an ordeal. Balanced precariously, it must be pinned and strapped tightly to the head. A lady walks stiffly, terrified of tipping hers into the stew. The veil drifts dramatically behind her, catching candlelight, but every step is tense, every turn calculated. The jewels themselves brought hazards. Lead was used to set stones, and gilt metals rubbed against skin. Over time, contact with these materials could cause rashes or even poisoning. You rub at your temple discreetly, feeling the itch beneath the circlet, but smile as another noble praises your radiant crown. No one cares that the radiance is bruising you slowly. Imagine the headaches. Hours of holding your head unnaturally straight, muscles straining to bear the weight of wealth. You cannot bow deeply, cannot nod easily. Every gesture becomes constrained by the burden atop your skull. Yet, to remove it is unthinkable. To walk into court bareheaded, with nothing glittering above, is to risk whispers that your fortune is failing. Then there is the symbolism of jewels themselves. Rubies for passion, emeralds for fertility, sapphires for wisdom. Each gem told a story, shaping how people read your beauty. A woman with emeralds in her headdress might be praised for her youthful allure, while one with sapphires was admired as learned and serene. The stones became an extension of identity, chosen not for comfort but for the message they projected. And still, the brutality lingered in the practical details. Veils caught in doorways, hennins toppled in the wind, circlets slipped during dances. Chronicles tell of a noblewoman whose hennin was so tall it struck a chandelier, catching fire before servants rushed to smother it. Another tale mocks a lady who leaned too far at dinner, her crown tumbling into the gravy. These accidents became court gossip, reminders of how fragile beauty's illusions were. Yet ridicule never killed the fashion. Instead, women doubled down, pins multiplied, straps tightened, crowns grew taller. Each correction added more discomfort, but also more certainty that the piece would stay in place. Imagine your maid jabbing yet another pin into your scalp, muttering prayers that tonight you will not disgrace yourself before lords and ladies. Outside the castle, peasants shake their heads. They wear simple coifs or bare hair, uncovered while working in fields. They laugh at nobles who cannot bend, cannot stoop, cannot walk freely because of their hairdressers, but secretly, perhaps they dream of trying one on, just once, to feel the weight of importance pressing down on their brow. Beauty's brutality always hides a seductive glow. Here's your light joke. Today people complain about headaches from oversized headphones or elaborate wedding updos. A medieval lady would snort and say, "Try wearing 10 pounds of bronze, glass and horsehair on your skull. Then we'll talk about pain." The cruelty extended beyond the physical. The jewels themselves were symbols of exploitation. Many were acquired through war, conquest or trade routes built on suffering. To wear them was to display not only wealth but also the silent cost borne by others. Imagine a sapphire glowing at your temple. Once pried from a distant mine where labourers toiled endlessly, beauty rested, quite literally, on invisible pain. By the end of the feast, your neck aches, your scalp burns, your temples pulse with the press of metal. You long to strip the crown off, to let your head rest, but etiquette holds you captive until the final toast is made. At last you retreat to your chamber, where your maid carefully lifts the circlet away. The relief is almost dizzying. You touch your brow and feel the tender ridges, the red imprint where beauty sat heavy all evening. And tomorrow, you'll put it on again, because beauty here is not about ease. It is about bearing the weight of wealth and power with a smile that hides the strain. The jewels glitter in the memory of others, long after the bruises fade on your skin. That is the brutal truth of crowns. They shine brightly in the hall, but in the quiet of your chamber, they leave only pain. The feast has ended, the music faded, but the remnants of beauty's demands remain scattered across the floor. Abandoned veils, broken pins, shoes kicked off in relief. You notice the shoes first. They lie near the benches, long pointed pole lanes curling like wilted leaves, their tips stuffed with moss and herbs. You think of the feet that wore them, toes pinched, arches strained, and then you glance upward at the women shuffling slowly down the corridor, their skirts drag, heavy with embroidery, layered wool, and sometimes stiffened with horsehair. Beauty clung to every inch of their bodies, not only in cosmetics and crowns, but in the daily torture of clothing that restricted every natural movement. You slip your own pole lanes back on, careful not to trip as you step forward. The points jut absurdly, forcing you to walk in tiny measured strides. To move quickly is impossible. To bend is humiliating. The skirts, meanwhile, drag at your ankles. They are magnificent in their design. Velvet trimmed with fur, hems stitched with pearls, but they weigh as much as armor. Each step becomes a tug of war between body and fabric. You cannot run, cannot bend, cannot even kneel without effort. Grace here is a performance of control against resistance. Mainstream fact: by the late Middle Ages, women's gowns had grown increasingly elaborate. Trains extended across the floor, sleeves draped to the ground, and hems were weighted with jewels and ornaments. The Burgundian court in particular prized gowns so long and cumbersome that servants had to carry portions of them while their mistresses walked. Men, too, endured fashion's cruelty. Doublets grew tight, hose constricted, and pole lanes lengthened to absurd degrees. The more impractical the garment, the clearer the proof of nobility. And now the quirky tidbit. Some noble women sewed tiny bells into their skirts, so that with every step they chimed faintly. Imagine a hall filled not only with the swish of fabric, but also a constant jingling chorus. Like a flock of cats disguised in velvet, it was meant to delight. But for anyone with a headache, it must have been maddening. Walking in these garments was slow agony. The skirts dragged through rushes on the floor, collecting dirt and spilled wine. Outdoors, they swept through mud and manure, soaking up filth. Servants scurried to clean and repair them, but stains lingered, smells clung. Imagine lifting your heavy hem to reveal the underside streaked with grime, all while keeping your face serene, as though the filth beneath didn't exist. Beauty demanded denial, even in the face of muck. Now consider dancing. The music swells and you are pulled into the center of the hall. Your partner bows. You curtsy, your skirts ballooning awkwardly. As you turn, the weight tugs against your waist. The hem catches at your heels. You shuffle more than glide, praying you won't step on your own train. Your partner struggles too, his poulaines nearly tangling in yours. To the watching crowd it appears elegant, two nobles circling with poise. Inside, every muscle aches. Every movement is calculation against disaster. The hennins, those tall cone-shaped hats with flowing veils, make dancing worse. Tilt too far, and your headgear sways precariously. Veils snag on torches, feathers brush against chandeliers. You smile nervously, aware that one misstep could turn grace into spectacle. The hall would erupt in laughter, and the shame would linger long after the bruises faded. Beauty was fragile, ready to betray you at any moment. Sitting offered little relief. Gowns bunched awkwardly, paulaines jutted uncomfortably beneath benches. Some ladies perched on the very edge of seats, afraid their skirts would wrinkle. Men sat stiffly, hose straining, doublets digging into ribs. The feast was less a time of leisure than a test of endurance, a parade of discomfort disguised as elegance. Here's your gentle joke. Imagine today's runway shows. Models hobbling in impossible shoes, skirts so wide they can't fit through doors. Medieval banquets were the same, only without cameras. Nobles paraded their suffering live, admired not despite the impracticality, but because of it. The brutality extended to daily tasks. Try climbing stairs in a gown with a train, skirts snagging on each step. Try mounting a horse in pauline, points bending clumsily. Even eating was constrained. Sleeves so long they dipped into bowls, cuffs stiff with jewels knocking over cups. Servants often tied sleeves back with ribbons, but still accidents happened. Chronicles mock nobles who trailed their sleeves in gravy, turning fashion into farce. Yet the very absurdity became a mark of prestige. To struggle meant you were rich enough not to care about practicality. Behind the glamour was pain. Hours of standing in restrictive clothing, left back sore, legs trembling, feet blistered, shoulders strained. Servants massaged their mistresses at night, rubbing ointments into swollen ankles or raw shoulders, but the cycle resumed each morning. Nobility lived in constant discomfort, bound by fabric as much as by social rules. And the garments weren't merely heavy, they were dangerous. Trains dragged near open flames, sleeves brushed into candles. Chronicles tell of women whose gowns caught fire, veils blazing like torches before horrified onlookers smothered them. To dress beautifully was to risk immolation. Yet still, the fashion persisted. Better to risk burning than appear plain. The symbolism was inescapable. Long trains proclaimed idleness. No one could work in such clothing. Pointed shoes declared wealth. No one could labour in them. Heavy gowns weighed down the body, but also proclaimed status. The body itself becoming a stage for luxury. You were a walking banner of privilege, even if the privilege left you limping. Now picture the end of the evening. The music fades, guests disperse, and you return to your chamber. Servants peel away the layers, the gown, stiff with dirt at the hem, the underdress, damp with sweat, the polaines, leaving toes red and swollen. You sink onto the bed in only your shift, your body sighing with relief. Yet even in freedom, you know the garments await tomorrow. They hang in chests, gleaming with embroidery, whispering promises of admiration and threats of pain. Beauty, here, was never soft or effortless. It was heavy, awkward, and often humiliating. To wear the fashions of nobility was to accept constant restriction. Every step, every movement was dictated by fabric and leather, by jewels and pins, and yet, in the candlelit hall, when all eyes turned and admiration rippled through the crowd, the pain became invisible. The illusion was complete, and that illusion was everything. The torches burn low, shadows flickering across stone walls, and you sit quietly watching the faces of nobles as they lean toward one another in hushed conversation. Their brows are plucked high, their cheeks powdered ghost white, their hair padded with horsehair and veiled beneath jeweled crowns. They look serene, almost divine, but there is something dangerous in the way others glance at them. Too much beauty, too much allure, could turn admiration into suspicion. In the medieval world, beauty wasn't just a blessing, it could brand you as a witch, a temptress, or even a servant of the devil. Imagine being born with striking features, luminous eyes, golden hair, a complexion that needed little powder. You'd think it a gift. But in a society where anything extraordinary demanded explanation, beauty this strong often stirred unease. Whispers crept through halls. She must be using charms. She must have brewed a potion. A woman admired by too many risked being accused of bewitching men with unnatural powers. What made you radiant today could make you dangerous tomorrow. Mainstream fact. Throughout the late Middle Ages, accusations of witchcraft increasingly targeted women whose looks, behavior, or influence seemed threatening. Some were accused of using beauty to ensnare men, with love potions and charms often mentioned in trial records. Even physical adornment could be twisted into evidence. A woman's use of cosmetics or elaborate hairstyles might be described as demonic trickery. Now the quirky tidbit. One surviving superstition claimed that if a woman tied a ribbon soaked in her own sweat around a man's neck, he would fall hopelessly in love with her. Imagine noblemen panicking if they saw a scarf left behind at a feast, suspecting it was not fashion, but sorcery. Beauty rituals and witchcraft blurred uncomfortably, leaving women trapped between admiration and fear. Picture yourself at court. You've taken great care this morning. Powdered cheeks, painted brows, golden hair glimmering beneath a veil. When you enter the hall, heads turn, and night's eyes linger too long. A merchant's son stares openly. Compliments drift toward you. She glows, she shines. But at the edge of the crowd, someone mutters, "She glows too much." Suddenly, the same powder that earned you praise yesterday marks you today as suspicious. The church played its part. Priests thundered against cosmetics, calling them lies that deceived men and mocked God's creation. A woman who painted her skin was said to be hiding corruption, tempting men into sin. Beauty itself was dangerous, but manufactured beauty was worse. A deliberate snare laid by cunning women. You sit in the pew, listening to the sermon, your powdered face burning under your veil. Every eye seems to weigh you, judging whether you are angelic or demonic. Imagine the irony. Women plucked, powdered, and painted to survive courtly life, then risked condemnation for succeeding too well. Beauty was demanded and punished in the same breath. To be plain was to be overlooked. To be too beautiful was to invite peril. You walked a razor's edge daily, balancing admiration against accusation. The suspicion wasn't only spiritual. Political enemies could twist beauty into weapon. A noble woman influencing her husband with charm might be accused of witchcraft by rivals. Chronicles sometimes described queens or mistresses as bewitching kings, a poetic flourish, but also a whisper of slander. If a ruler made unpopular decisions, blame could fall not on him, but on the beauty of the woman beside him. Her face became a scapegoat for his failures. Picture the private fear this caused. You sit before your mirror at night, brush in hand. Do you darken your brows more boldly, risking whispers of sorcery? Or do you soften them, blend into the background, risking invisibility? Every choice is a gamble. The line between admired and accused is thinner than the paintbrush tracing your skin. Even hair carried risks. Golden locks, praised in poetry, could also spark envy. Women with naturally fair hair were sometimes said to be touched by fairies, not always a compliment. In times of famine or plague, when fear ruled, that fairy touch could be recast as a devil's mark. Suddenly, your shining braid was no longer holy, but cursed. Here's your light joke for the night. Imagine a modern celebrity being told her red carpet look was so good it had to be witchcraft. You must have made a pact with the devil for that contour. Medieval people weren't being ironic. They truly believed it. Punishments varied. Most women escaped with whispers, reputations slightly tarnished, but some suffered trials, torture, even execution. Beauty alone didn't condemn, but when paired with misfortune, a sick neighbor, a failed harvest, it could tip the scales. Your painted lips, once kissed in admiration, might suddenly be accused of speaking curses. And yet, despite the risk, the pursuit of beauty never stopped. Women still painted, still plucked, still wore jewels and false hair. The very things condemned as witchcraft were also the tickets to survival at court. To refuse beauty was to fade into obscurity. To embrace it was to court danger. No path was safe. Now imagine yourself at a midsummer festival. Music swirls, fires blaze, and maidens dance with flowers in their hair. One shines brighter than the rest, her veil embroidered, her hair golden, her skin pale beneath powders. People murmur with admiration, but then a man, drunk on ale, stumbles and swears she bewitched him. Laughter ripples, but the seed of suspicion is planted. Tomorrow, that seed might grow into a rumor, and the rumor into something deadly. The brutality here isn't in the powder burning your skin or the shoes crippling your feet. It is in the way beauty itself becomes a trap. You can do everything right, follow the trends, obey the rituals, and still find yourself condemned. Admiration and accusation are twins, born from the same root. By night's end, you return to your chamber, head heavy from jewels, face stiff with powder. You wash away the mask with wine, staring at your raw skin in the bronze mirror. For a moment you wonder what it would be like to live free of both beauty and suspicion, to walk in the sun, hair loose, face bare, laughter unburdened, but you know that dream is impossible here. Tomorrow, the powder returns. Tomorrow, the whispers will too. The fire in the hearth burns low, the crackle soft and steady, and the night has quieted. You feel the weight of all that has passed. The powders, the plucking, the horsehair wigs, the whalebone stays, the pointed shoes, the whispered accusations of sorcery, and you sense how exhausting beauty has been across these centuries. But in the hush of this final chamber, you also realize how those standards began to fade, slowly, as shadows lengthen at the close of the Middle Ages. Beauty remained cruel, but it shifted, softened in places, leaving echoes that still touch the modern world. You sit at the edge of a carved oak bed, heavy curtains drawn against the cold. The gown has been stripped away, the jewels unpinned, the headdress set carefully into its chest. For once, your skin is bare. No powders, no vinegars, no roux. It stings with rawness, red from years of scraping and painting, but beneath that sting lies freedom. Tonight, in this dim chamber, You are simply human. Mainstream fact: by the 15th and 16th centuries, beauty ideals began to change. The Renaissance slowly replaced medieval severity with a focus on fuller figures, natural blush, and more realistic hair. Cosmetic still existed, but portraits shifted towards softer, rounder faces, brighter skin tones, and less exaggerated silhouettes. The brutality of earlier standards never disappeared entirely, but its edges dulled. Quirky tidbit: in some Italian courts, women brushed their teeth with crushed coral powder mixed with honey, claiming it made smiles shine. Of course, it also abraded enamel, but compared to lead or vinegar masks, it felt almost gentle. Progress is sometimes only a shift from one cruelty to a slightly lesser one. You imagine sitting in a Renaissance hall, watching women whose brows have grown back, whose gowns, though still heavy, flow more freely, whose smiles, though sugar-stained, are painted with less suspicion. Beauty, here, has not become kind, but it has become different, and that difference, across centuries, is what survival looks like. Now lean back, the pillow cool against your cheek. You think of all the standards you've endured: pale skin painted with poisons, brows plucked until the face became mask-like, hair bleached with urine and saffron, ribs bound in stiffened cloth, toes crushed into absurd points, crowns heavy with jewels, skirts so long they tripped you, perfumes masking unwashed flesh, and the constant risk of being admired too much or too little. Each ritual carved pain into daily life, each standard a test of endurance, and yet despite it all, people endured, because in their world, beauty wasn't optional, it was survival. The hall outside is silent now, the torches guttered, the perfumes faded into stale air. In that silence you can almost hear the centuries shift, the long sigh of women laying down their plucking knives, setting aside their poisonous powders, loosening the stays that bit into ribs. You feel the ache in your own body begin to ease, as though time itself is loosening its grip. Here's your quiet joke to soften the night. Imagine telling a medieval lady that one day people would bake in the sun deliberately, paying coins to lie beneath glowing lamps, desperate for tans. She'd laugh until her hennin tipped sideways, then warn you to avoid sorcery. Beauty, fickle as the wind, never rests in one place for long. And so, as the world moved forward, medieval brutality melted into new shapes. Pale faces gave way to rosy cheeks, pointed shoes to rounded slippers, hennins to softer veils. The cruelty didn't vanish. It simply evolved. Beauty standards are always cages. Only the bars shift with the age. You feel that truth settle in your chest like a weight. Freedom is rare, illusion eternal. But tonight, as you lie back and close your eyes, the story begins to soften. The cruelty you've walked through becomes distant, like echoes in stone halls long abandoned. The powders crumble to dust, the wigs collapse into tangles, the shoes rot in the earth. What lingers isn't the pain, but the strange, stubborn resilience of those who endured it. They lived, they laughed, they even loved, carrying their burdens of beauty with a dignity history still remembers. The fire dims further, each crackle slower, softer. Your breath slows with it. The heavy garments of memory slip away one by one. No more plucking, no more vinegar masks, no more bruising crowns or shoes that twist the bones. You are left with only yourself, bare skin, tired body, quiet soul. The standards of the past fade into shadow, leaving you in peace. The night deepens, and words stretch into longer, softer threads, as though the voice itself wishes to lull you into rest. Imagine the halls empty now, tapestries swaying gently in the draught, candles long extinguished. The perfumes are gone, the chatter silenced. Only silence remains. Silence, and the steady rhythm of your breath. Let your shoulders fall heavy, the tension easing from your neck. Let the images of cruel powders and gilded crowns dissolve into mist. The echoes of laughter, whispers, accusations, and applause fade into nothing. You are no longer bound by standards, no longer weighed by expectation. You are free, here in the hush of history's long exhale. Soften your gaze, or close your eyes fully if you wish. Let the imagined halls around you melt into soft shadow. No more feasts, no more plucking, no more cruel shoes or painted masks. Only the quiet of this room, the steady comfort of being safe, alive, and untouched by those brutal demands. And as the final embers die, leaving only faint warmth in the hearth, let yourself drift fully now. The story has ended, the long march of beauty's cruelty laid to rest. You are here, in silence, in softness, in calm. Good night.